Hi there, welcome to Still Learning, the space where we celebrate growth in all its messy, beautiful, and raw forms. I'm your host, Fortune Fowle, and if you're here, you're right where you need to be, because here we're embracing the beauty of being works in progress. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about my past spring break where I had the amazing opportunity to go do some service work out in Charlotte, North Carolina, which completely shifted my perspective as I got to partner with an amazing organization called Life Connections. It helped me see a whole new side to the justice system and invited me into a world of restorative justice, a system where it doesn't seek to punish but transform lives. So let's dive into everything I learned on this incredible experience I had, unpacked all the things I got to know and reflect on, and what it truly means to be able to serve others like Christ. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Still Learning Podcast. Another Monday, another Still Learning Monday. So happy to have you here with me and so happy to be able to get into this conversation with you guys today where we're going to be talking about my spring break trip. I just got back from Charlotte, North Carolina, which, by the way, that was my first time ever being in North Carolina and also technically South Carolina because where we were staying was in South Carolina, but the organization we were partnering with was in North Carolina. And so 2 new states I got to officially say that I have visited. So that was pretty cool. But I'm really excited to be able to talk with you guys about all the incredible things I got to do. I mean, guys, I'm talking from building fences and painting rooms, conversations with people who are incarcerated that really challenged and shaped my perspective and my mindset in ways that I didn't expect. And I'm just really excited to tackle that with you guys, reflect on this trip with you guys here, and just share everything I got to learn in our justice system. I hope that this conversation is meaningful, impactful, and just serves as another thing to kind of think about and open your mind to, as it did for me while I was on this trip. So first, let's talk about how this even happened and how I even decided to do a service trip for my spring break. Why wasn't I in Cancun? I was out here volunteering my time, my spring break to go and serve people. And honestly, last year, September, I was really thinking to myself, hey, I want to do something different for spring break. I really wanted to be able to give back to people. And so my school does this thing called alternative spring breaks, where you can take an opportunity to use your spring break to do a service opportunity serving different organizations. And it's all over the country. And there's even some locations we have outside of the country, so globally. So you apply and then you do your top choices for which organizations you want to partner with. And then if you're accepted into it, then, you're doing that, your alternative spring break. So that's really how I got into it. And so the organization I applied to, which was Life Connections, that was my top choice and I ended up getting it, which was really exciting for me. And everything is included in this trip. So your room, your board, your flight, your meals. So all of that was included. It definitely was more of a humble type of accommodation. Honestly, our accommodations, I loved them. It was very cabin lodge vibes. And also in terms of food, we did cook majority of our meals, but I also liked that. I felt like that was very wholesome and a very great way for us to bond and get to know one another better. Because fun fact, I didn't know anyone who I was going on this trip with. All I knew was that they were people who went to my school. And that was something that really didn't hit me until it got closer and closer and closer to the trip, because I knew I was going by November. I want to say I knew this was going to be my spring break plans. So it kind of just sat in the back of my mind. But as spring break came closer and closer and closer, I realized, oh my gosh, it was just so funny to me how I was really doing something that was stepping out of my comfort zone. I started thinking about things oh my gosh, how is the bathroom gonna work? Do people shower in the morning? Do people shower at night? Do people go to bed early? Do people go to bed late? Those are kind of things that you already know or feel more comfortable living with other people if you were going on a trip with your friends versus strangers. But again, it was something that was taking me out of my comfort zone. I mean, this whole experience was something that took me out of my comfort zone in a way very new for me and something that I've never done before. And so, I kind of started getting a bit shaky feet, getting closer and closer, but I I didn't bail out. I'm really proud of myself for not bailing out, for sticking through it, because genuinely it is an experience I wouldn't change or exchange for the world. I didn't realize how much this service trip would be such a trip that led to such personal growth and learning for me as an individual. I mean, typically we think that if we're going to do a service trip, if we're going to go serve others, we are pouring out onto others. But one thing that God really showed to me is that service isn't just about you pouring out to others, but you also being poured into by others. And that was genuinely something that was a commonality throughout the whole entire trip, of being poured into by so many different individuals in ways that I didn't think was possible. And in ways that I was serving them, they didn't even realize that they were also serving me in return. It was just great. Like, I think I keep saying that, but it really was great. And I am going to get into specifics of the trip and everything that I learned and things like that. But yeah, that is just to give you guys a brief overview of how my spring break, I ended up in Charlotte, North Carolina during a service trip, and not in Puerto Rico or Mexico like many of my friends did. But like I said before, and I iterate again, it was such an incredible experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I am just so excited to be able to delve into everything I learned, everything that I got to see, was exposed to, and how I was really poured into in this trip with you guys. So to start us off, I want to talk about the organization we partner with out there. So we partner with Life Connections, and Life Connections is an organization that is all about keeping children out of the justice system, out of being incarcerated at a young age. We understand the impact that can have on young individuals, especially individuals of color. We see that leading to, future imprisonment when they're adults, and how that can further affect their quality of life. And so they're all about preventing that. So we have some preventative justice here as well coming to play that this organization is a part of. But another thing that they do is that they provide education and resources to incarcerated individuals. And the founder of the nonprofit organization actually goes out and teaches in the Mecklenburg County Detention Center to these individuals. And he teaches them this book that he created with a co-partner, because the founder is also a licensed clinical psychologist. So this is a theory that he long studied and researched and put into a book, and now uses it to be able to really help transform and shape these individuals' lives who are currently incarcerated, and helping them understand that their past does not define their future. And it's one of the most impactful aspects of this partnership that we're able to do with this organization. And so the book is called Be Print. And if you honestly want to go purchase the book for yourself after hearing this episode and you become curious, it's called Creating Your Be Print, Drafting Your Personal Blueprint for Living. It's by Glenn Smith, who is the founder of the nonprofit organization that we got to work with, and Shelley Roy was the co-author of the book. And we got our own personal copies, which was pretty cool that they gave that to us. And the key thing with Be Print and the theory that it's talking about and what is taught to these individuals who are incarcerated is PCT, which stands for perceptual control theory. And perceptual control theory is a psychological framework that explains how people regulate their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It helps teach individuals to identify what is influencing their actions and how they can take control of their own responses rather than feeling powerless to their circumstances. And in fact, we got to do a couple crash course classes with Glenn about the perceptual control theory, Be Print, have some really engaging conversations with him about this theory and how we can apply it to our own lives or our own thoughts or what we agree with or don't agree with the theory. But he gives a journal so that we can take notes as we're doing this. And so I'm going to share some of those notes and some takeaways that I got from the crash course classes that we got to do, because honestly, I found a lot of things that were spoke about in the book and that we discussed really reflected biblical principles that I abide by, because I abide by the truth, but really how those can be applied to life and how they were connecting a lot to the truth, the word of God. The word does test everything to his spirit, and very much so I was actively putting that into practice. But he gave us a brief summary of what perceptual control theory also means. And basically he stated that it's easier to control your perception than it is to control the world. And an example that he gave is your worth isn't based on external factors or things out of your control, right? It's not based on anything. That in fact, that how we are, how we behave, how we engage in the world has nothing to do with external circumstances, but internally. And I know that's like, what? That doesn't make sense. And we're gonna break it down a little bit further in this episode, but also I definitely don't think I would be able to do it justice that it deserves. So if you want to learn more about it, again, you can get your own copy, you can look it up. Again, so definitely look into it if you're interested. Perceptual control theory. I'm just gonna be talking about the things that I picked up from it and learned in these, again, crash courses. So I am by no means an expert in this, but just some things that I thought really stood out to me that I wanted to share with you guys and that I thought I might put into practice in my own day-to-day life. So like I said, the B-print and perceptual control theory is taught to these incarcerated individuals within Mecklenburg County, and it helps them understand why they think the way they do and how they can change their harmful thoughts, patterns, and actions and behaviors. It gives them a structured way to reframe the perspective, to take accountability, and step into a new way of thinking. And as I said before, as I was learning about PCT, I couldn't help but see parallels to biblical principles and reaffirms what the Father tells us, which is about the importance of renewing our mind and breaking things like generational cycles and stepping into a transformed identity. And really, that also applies to restorative justice, what we got to really learn about and be exposed to while on this trip as well. And so while the model itself isn't necessarily faith-based for me, I found it to be really deeply connected to scriptures about how God calls us to think differently, live differently, and break free from destructive patterns, and how God really lets us know that we are not what the world defines us to be, but who He has called us to be. And so here are some things that I wrote down that I found really interesting from learning and talking about PCT. Perceptual control theory says that what is driving your feelings, actions, etc. is whatever is happening on the inside. And there was like a whole diagram that he drew out for us and how that connects. Again, I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to fully dive into that because there are other things on the trip that I want to be able to talk about with you guys today. But just again, if you're curious, I personally am someone who always been interested in like psychology and just like the mind. So if you're anything like me who nerds out on things like that, I definitely think give this a try. Look into it. But we talked about references, so how we have references in our heads. So an example of this would be why are we here, our purpose, how people should treat us, principles, ethics, and morality. Like those are things that we always draw back to. And so if you're someone who's like, oh, I think people should hold the door open for the next person coming in, right? Like that is a reference point you have. And if let's say someone sees you coming but doesn't hold the door open for you, you might deem that person as disrespectful because their action didn't align with your internal reference point in your head, which is that, respectful people hold the door open for one another. It's like a very like minuscule, like smaller scale example of a reference point. There are so much bigger things like ethics and moral dilemmas, things like that. But that's just to give you guys kind of an example of what that means. And again, applying back to how PCT says, like what is driving our feelings and actions is whatever is happening inside us. So those internal references and how our external circumstances or environment, whether they align with that or don't align with that, will kind of determine how we react. I also wrote down different things that he learned from mentors in his life who've spoken to him, and I really like this one that said, no punishment, but no excuses, which I thought was really neat. I have been saying the word neat a lot, guys, like as if I'm some like 70s, like I was born in that time. I wasn't. I just love the word, like, it was so neat. I don't know. But back to what I was saying, it says no punishment, but no excuses. And basically what that mantra means is that if I fall short, I have to say to myself, I have more work to do than giving up and wallowing in shame and guilt. It is a mantra that you are taking both self-accountability, but also giving grace to yourself, right? You're not allowing yourself to wallow in that shame and guilt. You're going to own up to your actions, but you're also deciding right then and there to not only own up to your actions, but how can you move forward from these actions and be better from here? And that's why I really love it, because it really opens this door for grace and opens this door where people are able to become better than what they were, and that you are not holding a person to their wrongdoing, but you are believing that from their wrongdoing they can learn to do good. And I really think it's a testament, and it just speaks to how God is with us, his never-ending grace every single day, how we can show that to others too and to ourselves. So I just thought that was a really neat mantra and something that I want to hold on to for my life. Another thing I wrote down, which I already knew, but I think I just wrote it down because just that reminder once more that forgiveness is not an act, but a lifelong process. That forgiveness is something that you have to do like daily, doing forgiveness every single day. It's not a momentary thing, but it's a life thing. And I really think that's important. He followed up with this quote that he heard before, which is that forgiveness is for yourself, which we know we're taught this and we know this. I genuinely believe forgiveness is for yourself, not the other person, because if you're not able to forgive, you're holding on to resentment and anger and hurt, which is genuinely poison to yourself. Like, not forgiving someone is poison to yourself. You are harming yourself by being unforgiving, not the other person. And so I think I genuinely believe I wrote that down because that reminder that forgiveness is this lifelong process that allows me to prevent myself from poisoning my inside, but ensuring that I'm continuously doing the work that I have to do to be the best version of myself and have a heart full of grace, mercy, and compassion, because that leads to a life of more longevity and peace and love. And that's the kind of person I want to be and become. And then the last thing I'm going to share with you guys that I wrote down, which is, who do I become if I do or don't mindset, rather than what will I get if I do it, or will I be punished if I don't? Basically, what that really means is that everything you do is not focused on living or being motivated by the praise or expectations of people. So really not living for people, but everything you do, everything you say, how you react, how you live is based on the person you want to become. And so I just found that really impactful because it really brings you back to center in the sense of, is what I'm doing because I want praise from people, or is what I'm doing going to help me become the person that I want to be? Which for me, I want to be more Christ-like. I want to be loving and caring and forgiving and give grace. That is the kind of person I want to become. And that can look different for you. That can look different for anyone. But centering yourself back to, is what I'm doing bringing me closer to the person I want to become, or is it not? And I really think that helps you make decisions where you're not basing it on praise or expectations, or you're not living based on the motivation of others or how people will view you. But at the end of the day, how do you view yourself? And it's the person you are, the person you're becoming, someone you're proud of. And I had to write that down because it was just so good, guys. I'm telling you, it was so good. And that was really what I was meaning at the beginning of this episode, guys, when I said that I was not expecting to be poured into and to really have my mind renewed and really having to reflect on my mindset from this trip. Like, really was challenging me in ways that I did not expect, that I am so grateful for. Moving forward from perceptual control theory, I want to dive into the other key aspect of this trip that I got to be exposed to and learn so much more about, which is restorative justice. So restorative justice is not just about crime and punishment. It's about healing, accountability, and transformation. It's the belief that people can change and that justice should be about restoration, not just retribution. And I definitely think that this is something really pertinent to learn about, to know, and understand, especially in the climate that we are currently in within our country. And also just knowing that this is something that has progressively been something that we have been evaluating, which is our justice system, which is our prison systems, right? How we are treating people who are incarcerated. If you did not know, the loophole of slavery is within our 13th Amendment within the Constitution, which states that slavery is legal if you are incarcerated. And when we look at things of how many prisons are for profit, and again, I'm not trying to get into anyone's politics but as believers in Christ, and I don't think it's talked about enough, we are meant to care for justice and want to uphold justice and seek justice because we serve a God who is a God of justice. So to care about those things, so to have these discussions and to care about these things is honorable, right? It makes sense that we seek and desire justice for those who are experiencing injustice. It's important that we learn about these things and ensure that we are knowledgeable about the true nature, the history, the root of our criminal justice system, how vulnerable populations, marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by the system that we currently have in place. It's important important to educate yourself on those things. I'm nowhere near a criminology major. I'm very much health science, nursing, but this impacts and infiltrates and is the basis of all our systems, healthcare system, education system. You talk about school to prison pipeline. It literally impacts all of our systems. So I genuinely do believe you should educate yourself on it. And I also am someone who's like, we have too much available at the tips of our hands to not educate ourselves on these things. And so that was my little spiel, guys, but that was just something that we should seek to have better understanding of. And I'm really grateful that I took part of this trip and really allowed myself to learn more about something, because I learned so many things that I thought I knew, but I really didn't know. And so this trip really opened up my eyes to so many things and injustices that are within our system, but it also gave me hope. But going back into what I was learning about restorative justice here, and honestly, how I got to see it put into practice. And so how restorative justice is in practice, because again, it is a newer concept, right? In the last 5 years, this is something that we started hearing about. I mean, it's always been around, but even more now, people are actually paying attention to it. For example, like social determinants of health. We always knew that external circumstances such as housing, access to healthy food has always impacted people's ability to live a healthy, high quality life. But it's just recently that we're actually paying attention to it and deciding to do something about it. And really, that is kind of how restorative justice is in this current timeline of our lives and history right now. I don't know why I'm talking like this, like in our timeline, in our history right now. Like, what? Also, you guys cannot tell from this, I actually am such a history nerd. Like, I actually love history so much. Like, I was not a math girly. I was not your statistics girly, your physics girly. I absolutely detested those things. And me and Isaac Newton have a lot to beef about. But I was your history girl. I love history. I'm talking about European history. I'm talking about ancient Aztec history. But I love history. So as you can tell, I'm kind of nerding out, geeking out about this. Restorative justice in practice, it looks like this. 1, restoration, bringing something or someone back to its original condition or purpose. 2, rehabilitation, helping people reintegrate into society with tools, skills, and a renewed sense of identity. 3, accountability, because we're still holding people accountable for the actions that they took, right? We're not taking accountability out the equation, right? But we're also saying that accountability is not just about punishment, but responsibility and making amends. That's the whole thing. We stopped at punishing, where our current justice system is just punishment and it stops at that. But restorative justice is about taking a step further and not just seeking to punish an individual, but hold them accountable and seek to bring them to a point of amends. How can we, and this is going into 4, reconcile the individual back to community, back to society. So reconciliation, restoring relationships between offenders, victims, and the community. And that's difficult. A system that is about restorative justice is more difficult than a system that is just about punishment. It really is, because restorative justice brings back humanity. It brings humanity back into the equation. And humanity is not easy. It's messy. It's emotional. But it's one that allows us to live and engage with one another with so much more compassion and grace than we currently are. The thing with restorative justice is that it's really reflective of yourself, of your system, of those who are in the system. So from prosecutors, defendants, attorneys, judges, victims, jury, like witnesses. It also asks us, how do we restore what was lost? How do we ensure this person doesn't just serve time, but actually is transformed in the time that they are serving? And again, I was just reminded of our Father in heaven, how he is a God of restoration. And this is what he's all about. Jesus literally died so that we can be restored and reconciled to the Father. My belief system, and again, this podcast is for anyone, so we don't even have to share the same beliefs, but what I believe and what I believe to be true is that our God is focused and seeks to restore and reconcile before he ever seeks to punish and destroy. His first instinct, his natural inclination is to restore us and to reconcile us to him, to our true and proper form and worship. And restorative justice reflects all of that. And I genuinely believe that's why it captivated me so much. And grateful that I just get to share it and talk about it with you guys. Like that I get to have these conversations and be a part of these conversations. Like I don't even need to be contributing it, and I don't even need to be the one leading the conversations. But the fact that I even get to witness these conversations happen and be an heir to it, I am receiving just as much as a person who is talking. I really do think that an active listener benefits more than an active talker. You don't miss a beat. So I'm just grateful that I even got to be in the spaces and in the rooms where I got to receive from these conversations that people who are in the work and in the business of restoration, because that's what we got to see at the end of our trip. We got to take a visit to Mecklenburg County Detention Center and see exactly how they put restorative justice into practice. And it was clear as day the moment we stepped into there, the moment we spoke with the program leaders and talked about all the different programs they have for the people in there and their motto and their vision. It was so clear that they were about humanizing the system. Here's how I knew that. Because the moment we came in there and they started telling us about what they do, they said that they don't call their detention center a jail. They call it a facility. And they don't call the people who are within there, the incarcerated individuals, inmates, they call them residents. And again, that power of what you say, what you speak over people, what you label people, again, ensuring that they still have a sense of identity there, ensuring that there is still humanity that is here, that is in place, because we see that in our traditional justice system that we seek to strip people of all of their humanity, and that makes it easier, right? When you strip people of their humanity, when you forget that someone is human, that is how we have things like slavery, and that is how we have things that have happened like the Holocaust, right? When you strip people of their humanity, and they're all about ensuring, restoring, and keeping their humanity, not forgetting that they too are human, which was such a beautiful thing to see, and while being there, I got to learn something that I, again, didn't realize, that the difference between jail and prison is that the people within Mecklenburg County Detention Center are innocent people. People who are in jail across the country, legally, they are innocent. They have not been convicted or sentenced at all. Jail is basically a holding cell until their case goes to trial, until a decision is made on their case. Yet we do not see in our traditional justice system that they are treated as such. Like, these are genuinely innocent people. Legally, they are innocent. Yet we see that the moment that they are in handcuffs, they are treated as guilty. That really blew my mind. And it's something that I held on to, because prison is when you are convicted and sentenced, and that's where you go. But that really changed how I viewed the individuals who we got to actually have conversations with. We got to have conversations with the residents, which I was super excited about. Like, that was something I was looking forward to, because I really just wanted to hear their stories. I wanted to hear about them and who they are and how this place is helping them, because the facility has so many programs that are focused on mental health, education, getting them their GED, helping them get their college degrees. They have parenting classes, they have entrepreneurship opportunities where they can actually start a business for themselves, so that when they do eventually leave the jail or the prison or wherever, they are able to actually support themselves. So really helping them re-enter back into society with something that they can be proud of, where they can be spending their time dedicating to how they can actually get back to their community. It's such a beautiful thing, and so many incredible programs that they have within the facility that is only happening within that facility in all of the state of North Carolina, which is another thing that blew my mind, that there's no other county doing this, just them, which says a lot, because if they were the only county in the state doing this, imagine them in regards to the country. Very few are doing this. But again, though that sounds discouraging, it also gave me hope that there are people who are doing this, and they are seeking to engage with other counties and encourage other people and meeting with other states to make this a norm instead of a minority, which again gave me so much hope for what can become of our future and for these individuals. But in having these conversations with them, we got to, again, they were pouring into us. Okay, I was benefiting from just hearing from them. They were telling the stories of their resilience and their transformation, and how they've been able to improve their minds and their habits and their patterns and break destructive cycles. Their words were so encouraging to us. They were reminding us to be patient with ourselves. And so many of them were victims of trauma, of poverty, reality of systemic issues. And they weren't these inherently bad people that we are told about in the media. And furthermore, it really brought to light how our current jails and detention centers have become replacement mental health facilities, and how our traditional justice system criminalizes vulnerability. We have become a society that would criminalize mental health, substance use disorder, and homelessness, because that is majority of individuals who are making up our justice system, right? I'm not saying there isn't people who shouldn't be put away. Like, I'm not saying I want serial killers walking out in the broad daylight. No one's saying that. But if majority of individuals are most vulnerable, people who just didn't get the help that they need, like, what does that say about us and the kind of people in society that we are? And so after that trip to the facility and talking with the residents, I really got to just sit back, take a moment to reflect on my experience that whole entire week that I got to be out there and work with life connections and learn more about restorative justice. And here are some of the things that I learned that I feel like really encapsulated the meaning of this trip and just how it really is pushing me and how I want to move forward and how I want to be and become as a person, especially in regards to justice and seeking justice and how that relates to my faith and aligns with God's plan and purpose for our life, but also as his people here on earth. During this trip, I was reminded that restoration is at the center of who God is. He doesn't just offer second chances, he offers transformation. And we receive this through Christ Jesus. God meets people in their brokenness and he brings them back to life, not just spiritually, but mentally, physically, in every way and form possible. And as followers of Christ, we are called to be part of that work. And so in doing that work, and in coming to understand that I too play a role in this. I too have not just been restored, but is meant to continue the work of restoration within myself and help aid in restoration within others, which is eye-opening. And it reminds me of how Jesus saw beyond labels. And there is countless moments in the Bible where Jesus did not care about a person's past, that, oh, you're a tax collector, or, oh, you used to be a prostitute, or this or that. Jesus didn't care, right? He saw beyond that. Where the world, where we see a sinner, where we see someone who's irredeemable, where we see someone who's gone too far, God sees someone worth saving. And we, including myself, can be so quick to write people off, but God doesn't seek to write people off, but continue writing their story, because it's not the end. He's like, the worst parts of yourself can be your beginning, but I surely won't allow it to be your end. That's the kind of God we serve. And in saying that, while being there at Mecklenburg County Jail, I learned that about over 95% of incarcerated individuals will be released back into society. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we want to release them? Do we want to release them as they came in, worse than, or better? And personally for me, and I'm pretty sure majority of everyone who's listening would say better. You would want them to come back better. And God operates the same way. When we come to him, he doesn't leave us as he found us. He transforms us, he renews us, and calls us into something greater. God invests in restoration. So why wouldn't we? Shouldn't we as his people fight for the same thing? And again, I want to reiterate, because generally one of the biggest misconceptions of restorative justice is that it ignores accountability, but it's far from true. It's actually about true accountability. Instead of punishing someone for one moment or moments in their life, because we will have plenty of moments in our lives, we ask instead, how do we ensure they never end up here again? Like, how are we stopping people from getting to this point? What are we doing? It doesn't excuse harm, but it provides tools for real change. And isn't that the gospel? Jesus held people accountable, but he held us accountable. Conviction is a thing. The God is holding us accountable of our wrongdoing, but he doesn't stop at conviction. He doesn't stop at judgment. He offers restoration in place of it. In the Bible, we see this again, another impactful moment, and there's so many moments of this with Jesus, but he told the woman caught in adultery, go and sin no more. And before he even told her that, when they were ready to cast stones and kill this woman, he said, whoever has never sinned, throw the first stone. No one was able to do that. Jesus right here in this story with this woman, he perfectly paired accountability and grace and showed us that that leads to true transformation. Those people were so ready to stone that woman, and they labeled her an adulterous woman. They just deemed her whole entire identity and significance in life to one point, to one mistake, to one choice in her life. They labeled her as that. And I don't think we really understand how labels really shape identity. And the world will try to define people by their worst mistakes. We have tried to define others by their worst mistakes. We have experience being defined by our worst mistakes. We may even define ourselves by our worst mistakes. But God calls us by our name, not our past. Jesus approached every single broken, outcast person, including myself and you, and he never defined them by their sin. Instead, he restored their dignity. He restored their hope. He restored unto them life. And as believers, as followers, we are called to do the same. Like, I am not just called to receive this for myself, but then go and share it to others. Like I said earlier, God is invested in restoration. He invests in this. And when being at Mecklenburg County and seeing how they invested in their residents' futures and how they were learning, growing, and being equipped for something greater, it just reminded me yet again that these were hardworking, intelligent individuals who were determined to change. And that's exactly how the Lord is with us. He doesn't just restore us, but he equips us for a greater purpose. And just Mecklenburg County, seeing what they were doing at that facility, was walking exactly that out. And so really, we should desire to have a system that isn't just about punishment, but restoration. It's about lifting up people who are oppressed, healing people who are broken, and offering hope where the world offers condemnation. That's how we step in and show justice in every single area of life we're in. This doesn't even just apply to those who are going to be working in this field or line of work, but in your own lives, in your own communities, in your family, in your friendships, with yourself. In what ways are you walking out restoration? In my career, how can I reflect God's justice and mercy? In my relationships, how do I practice grace and restoration? In my own heart, how do I allow God to transform me instead of staying the same? Again, how am I walking out restoration, not just for myself, but for others too? I want to be a part of bringing restoration in my life and unto people, and not condemnation, because I have been set free from that, and I want to be a part of helping set others free from that as well. So maybe restoration isn't just something we advocate for, it's something we become. We choose love when it's easier to judge. We see beyond labels and calling people by their past, but instead call them by their true identity. We offer the same grace that God has given us time and time again, because the truth is, any of us can be in that position, and it's by grace that you are not. And if God has restored us, we should be a part of restoring others. Because at the heart of it all, God is a God of justice, God is a God of mercy, and God is a God of restoration. So let's live like we believe that and start walking out restoration. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Still Learning. I hope today's conversation challenged you to see justice, redemption, and restoration in a new light, and remind you that no one is beyond the grace of God. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need this perspective today. And don't forget to follow @StillLearningPod on Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts and keep this conversation going with you. And if you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much if you leave a rating or review. It helps others find the podcast and continues growing this community. And as always, let me know how I can make this space better, because I'm still learning too. Remember, what it is now is not what it will always be or what it will become. Stay encouraged, stay rooted in truth, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Still Learning.